You'll remember the Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake incident, wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl several years back. The regulatory body which the federal government has, which interacts with broadcast television and radio, did actually issue a heavy fine, but then later rescinded that fine to the station because of because of this principle, this limitation of obscenity. Clear and present danger was a phrase that emerged from the Schenck versus United States case in 1919, involving a leader of a socialist group who, during World War I, was publishing pamphlets and making speeches encouraging folks not to participate in the war and to resist at great length the efforts of the government to enlist them for the war. The court decided against Schenck in favor of the United States government, basically saying that Schenck's speech was not protected by the First Amendment because it presented a seditious danger to the United States government, was sort of borderline treason, and presented the phrase they used was a clear and present danger to the United States. So it was decided that when the United States is in danger, it doesn't have to wait until it's attacked or a rebellion starts or something like that. It can act against those who are, for example, plotting an assassination or seriously considering the overthrow of the government. This category also includes hate speech, which is speech which is meant to inflame, hatred towards people of a particular race or minority group within society in a way that would cause them undue danger. Fighting words fall under this category as well. Fighting words really are defined as those words which have a tendency to directly incite violence. These could be words such as, or phrases, doing things like threatening police officers. These sorts of things are not protected speech. You don't just have that freedom. Slander is another category of limitation. Slander is basically whenever you knowingly use lies to harm the reputation of another person. This usually involves public figures, but as talk radio has taught us, these there's a lot of leeway in this category. You can continuously defame conservatives or liberals generally, or even in particular, and it's not really a case to be made one way or the other about slander per se, but it tends to be public figures. It tends to be newspaper editors and that sort of thing who either bring these cases against those bringing claims or have these cases brought against them in the case of newspapers and that sort of thing, who will publish either untrue or allegedly untrue things about a person in order to harm their reputation. There are smaller categories of First Amendment limitations which we won't necessarily be focusing on in our class, but one of these is copyright laws. We don't necessarily have the privilege of copying and redistributing materials that others own or have produced. There are laws limiting that, and they fall under the First Amendment limitations. The media, as we've mentioned, is regulated by the federal government to a certain extent. when that media is inherently of a public and completely accessible nature. All right, we've talked about the clear and present danger case a bit. Bears mentioning here, it is not illegal to support the concept of government overthrow. For example, belonging to the Communist Party, which would have ideologies opposed to the current frame of government, not just trying to get elected as one party among others. It's lawful to belong to groups which in principle are opposed to the current frame of government. Our Second Amendment has to do with the right to bear arms and or a well-regulated militia. It's actually kind of difficult to tell from the text which way this should be interpreted, whether it's an individual right to bear arms, as James Madison and Thomas Jefferson both claimed, or whether the right was more of a corporate one, sort of statewide, the right of a militia to form, kind of like the National Guard, to protect the people of that area. Madison and Jefferson were clear that this was an individual right for the purpose of resisting government tyranny. They both saw things very much in that light, following John Locke. Legal scholars do point out, though, that, well, this is a right in the Constitution. It's not necessarily an absolute right. And just as there's restrictions on free speech, there can also be restrictions on the possessions of weapons. The contemporary debate centers on issues of self-defense and crime deterrence, typically, as well as things like hunting, gun collection, and target shooting. None of these three major categories really applies directly to resisting tyranny from the government. But you could say perhaps self-defense has something to do with that, and probably is the strongest category of argument in favor of individual rights to bear arms. Third Amendment hasn't come up in a long time, shall we say, but is still completely valid. The quartering of soldiers basically is the invasion of private space by British soldiers who are stationed in America during colonial times, especially during and after the French and Indian War, or the 10 Years' War, and is one of the particular actions the British government was taking, which American colonists were very upset about, and is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. Fourth Amendment, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures. Among other things, this specifies that there need to be specific rather than general search warrants. General search warrants were one of the tools that the British government was using to just sort of have a dragnet for possible crime among colonists, and in England proper as well. These general warrants allowed officers to search all of your stuff, question anybody around, just kind of go house to house with impunity. So this specifically limits that style of investigation by the government into alleged crimes, and is one of the amendments, probably of the next three, that really establishes, I guess, what you'd call the right to be left alone, the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty.